Shawnee, why did your mother-in-law try to assassinate you?
Start it again, because
I just did it.
I
So
don't know what to
I'm
say.
having a sit down with Tintin. Do you know why your nickname is Tintin?
Well, I used to have a cowlick of hair, but it could be something slightly weirder to it. But no, that is as far as I know. Used to look like the man himself.
And of course, your father, Mario Reading, the writer, playboy, was one of my oldest and best friends for 50 years. And it's nice now that his both of his ex-wives are now good friends of mine. How do you think he'd feel about that?
Well, I think he'd expect it. I think he'd expect it, is what I could say to that, yeah.
So, your father translated Nostradamus from medieval French. Also, he was the person that I went to see Dumb and Dumber with, and I've never seen anyone laugh so much in my life. So what do you think about his sense of comedy?
My father was one of the funniest men that I'd ever known. He had a great intellect, he had a great mind, but the simplest of things would really get him going.
I think when I was 18, he was probably the first posh aristocrat that I'd ever met. But was he really that posh?
I think he was. Well, if you look at family legacy and where my father came from, absolutely. I mean, he was the grandchild of Kaiser Wilhelm. He was distantly related to Goethe, the German poet. He was fascinated by his background. He was actually told that he was related to Wilhelm on his great-grandmother's, or his grandmother's deathbed. She'd never told my grandmother. And she used to receive checks from Wilhelm back in the day when he moved her to Tegernsee and tear them up. God knows why. We would be in a much nicer position these days if she hadn't. But so I think his lineage and legacy was certainly aristocratic.
And also, his father was very amusing, Gilbert.
Gilbert was fantastic. I sadly never met Gilbert, but he had one of the most romantic and wonderful deaths I've ever heard of. So he used to live in Saint-Tropez, and he was a bit of a playboy, looked like David Niven, had the pencil moustache. He used to regularly gamble with Brigitte Bardot and Gunther Sachs, and I think it was one of those nights that he'd arrived back at his Saint-Tropez apartment when he had a heart attack and died surrounded in a beautiful three-piece suit with the cash that he'd won that evening, which was quite significant. My father was then called days later by the maid, who noticed a bit of an odd smell in the apartment, and went to find his father, who was surrounded by cash, and that paid for the funeral. And my dad buried him in the same three-piece suit he'd been with Brigitte Bardot in 3 days before, which I thought had a certain je ne sais quoi.
Brilliant. I also got on very well with Gilbert, Mario's father, because he definitely had a slightly weird sense of humour. When we were staying in some country house in Somerset, I think it was Peter Gilbert, the naval captain, Mario's father had a chemical toilet inside his orange camper van, and he used to demonstrate it in this guy's living room. And I thought that was wonderful. We were like...
Besties.
Yeah.
When you talk about the meeting with him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really talking about this, but, you know, when I first met Mario, he had been living in the south of France, and he had swords and something. And it was the most unlikely friendship because I, as is common knowledge, the son of a gypsy rag and bone man. So meeting this guy at university, we were both studying creative writing, and of course we both went on to be writers. In fact, Mario translated Nostradamus from medieval French, among other books, and I think only in his later life, you know, did he get the recognition that he deserved. But he'd also done a runner when he lost all his money in Lloyd's and went to Mexico. And then, of course, he came back with Claudia, who is now, you know, a good friend of mine.
I think the early story is fascinating because you both went to the same university, and in fact, you were worlds apart. You from a gypsy background, my father from an aristocratic polo-playing kind of society, and for whatever reason, which I think was over a woman, and Dad running out the door with a sword, to defend some sort of honour, you guys became the best of mates. And actually your synchronicity in life and the things that you love and hold dear and your intelligence completely encapsulated each other. He always had a fascination for the gypsy culture and the gypsies. And I think it was a wonderful marriage of friends that lasted many, many years, and resulted in you being my groomsman at my wedding years
Yes,
later.
I'm your groomsman. I wasn't actually asked to be your official godfather.
You've slightly preempted something that we're about to ask you later, Osborne. But I mean, here's the time. So my wife and I would very much love it if you would be a gypsy godfather to our son. Which I think you've preempted, but that was something we were going to ask you.
Well, there we are. That's a bit of synchronicity, but I'd be honoured, of course. And but I do feel that I was your moral guardian. So I managed to get you gambling at a very early age, and
That's true.
Drinking the finest wines known to humanity, and
Right.
never judging you for any of your misdemeanours.
No, of which there were a few.
So, Tintin, Laurie, I'm going to present you with this cap,
Wonderful.
which you have to put on,
Be lucky.
and you have to say that.
Be lucky.
Suits you, sir. Say that again.
I said you slightly preempted it when we spoke, but I was going to ask you to be the gypsy godfather of our boy. So if you'd like to take on the honour, Osborne, we'd very much like to have you.
I'd be proud to accept. Now, why do you call me Osborne?
Well, I mean, the obvious is your surname's Osborne. My father's always called you Osborne. It's got a certain ring to it. And in fact, calling you Bob would feel slightly peculiar. So Osborne's always been a name.
Good. And what do my duties involve as Indy's godfather?
Nothing godly, as you can imagine.
Paying off his gambling debts like I did yours?
Paying off his gambling debts, yeah. Encouraging him to, in the finer pursuits in life. Pushing him down a route of art and literature and fine wines.
Yeah.
Encouraging him to be, the most fun he can possibly be. I think you've always been a big figure in my life, and to have that move down to my son would be wonderful. And also, as you know, my father's not around anymore, so part of the reason to ask you to be my groomsman, part of the reason to ask you to be the godfather is you've always been a second dad to me. So
that groomsman was a good gig, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Chateau in Tuscany.
4,000 hectare estate, castle, fine wine, brilliant food. I mean, that's in my mind what a stag should be. Great company, none of this dressing up in awful clothing and getting paraded around Magaluf. I think we wanted to do it with Panaz, which I think we did.
Yeah, we had a very classy time.
Classy time indeed. It was indeed. Be remembered for a long time.
You just finished that wine, Tintin.
Yeah, you could buy some better plonk for the next interview.
I'll get another bottle out the cellar. Okay, there will be a part 2.
Cheers.
Be lucky.